is our second distinguished honoree, Sheriff Jerry Clayton of Washtenaw County. Here to introduce Sheriff Clayton is Morgan Foreman, Constituent Services Director for State Representative Felicia Braybeck, Michigan House 55, and Washtenaw County Community Advocate. Welcome, Morgan.
Good evening, everyone. Just first things I want to say is that I am not Sparty, and that is not how I broke my foot. And Algeria, I feel for you. I understand. I figured everybody would crack up once they saw that both of us were down. Just give me a second. Well, I am excited to be here. Is everybody else excited to be here? And thank you for this honor. So first, I would like to recognize Representative Whiteford. Thank you for coming and your work in the mental health space as well as my fellow colleagues from the House there. I did not catch your name, but thank you for being here as well as representatives for your bosses. First, a note from Felicia. Sending a huge congratulations to Jerry. What a deserving honor. For the past decade, I've had the privilege of working alongside Jerry. The work that I've been fortunate enough to partner with him around has included areas of racial equity, criminal justice reform, more specifically, the ways in which our mental health and criminal justice systems overlap. I'm continually grateful for his strong voice and advocacy around the ways in which police engage with the public and ways in which the system can interact and help folks with mental illness get the help that they need rather than end up in jail or our prison systems. Our community is so much better because of Jerry's leadership, and it has been an honor to work with him on efforts in Washtenaw County. Jerry, enjoy the night. You deserve all the praise for your forward-thinking and life-changing and transformational leadership. Sincerely, Felicia. Jerry Clayton is a 33-year criminal justice professional currently serving his 4th term as Washtenaw County Sheriff. Sheriff Clayton leads an organization of approximately 450 staff, serving a population of over 360,000, covering a 720 square mile geographical area. The Sheriff's Office delivery strategy focuses on community engagement, contributing to the building of strong and sustainable communities, and organizational fiscal responsibility. During his career with the Sheriff's Office, Jerry has served as Frontlines Corrections Officer, Deputy Sheriff, and Command Officer. He was also appointed to the following positions: Corrections Commander, Police Services Commander, and SWAT Team Commander. Jerry has been a certified criminal justice trainer and instructor for more than 25 years, specializing in a multitude of subject areas, including use of force disciplines, physical training, special weapons and tactics, cultural diversity, preventing racial profiling, and in the areas of staff management and supervision, developing customer service delivery strategies, and organizational leadership. Jerry has designed and instructed a variety of training programs and workshops, including court security officer training, cultural diversity training for law enforcement professionals, preventing bias police practices, and enhancing law enforcement and community trust workshop and civility workshops. Sheriff Clayton has provided training and subject matter expert consulting services to a variety of private and public sector clients, including the United States Department of Justice, the National Sheriff's Association, and the American Civil Liberties Union. In 2019-2020, Jerry served as a governor-appointed member of the Jail and Pretrial Incarceration Task Force, charged with developing and forwarding criminal justice reform recommendations to the governor and state legislature. He also served as a commissioner to the Michigan Commission on Law Enforcement Standards since 2013. MCOLS is responsible for developing and managing the training and licensing standards for all new law enforcement officers in Michigan. Sheriff Clayton recently served as chairperson for this commission. Sheriff Clayton serves on the boards of numerous local and national organizations, These include the Washtenaw and Area Council for Children, the local chapter of the National Alliance on Mental Health, the Washtenaw County Mental Health Treatment Court Advisory Board, the Washtenaw County Continuum of Care Board for Ending Homelessness, the New York University School of Law Policing Project Advisory Board, and the Vera Institute of Justice Policing Program Steering Committee, and the National Police Foundation Council on Police Reform and Race. Jerry has received international recognition for his work in the criminal justice field. In 2016, he was invited as a representative of law enforcement to attend an international community policing conference in Barcelona, Spain. In 2017, at the invitation of the United Nations High Commission of Human Rights, Sheriff Clayton was the representative from the United States and a presenter at an international conference on law enforcement and bias-based policing in Geneva, Switzerland. In 2020, Jerry was elected a founding member of the Council on Criminal Justice, an independent and nonpartisan national invitational membership organization and think tank focused on advancing the understanding of criminal justice policy, choices, and developing solutions that enhance safety and justice for all. There are very few times in your life where you get to be part of something bigger than yourself. Since I was a little girl, I've had the pleasure of watching Sheriff Clayton's career grow. I've grown up with his children. I've traveled with his wife on a horrible trip to Atlanta, where we got stranded on a bus on the side of 75. Do you remember that? Sheriff Clayton has responded to my calls when I was an educator and I had students with mental illnesses who were having hard times in the classroom, and he's responded with his best officers to come to my classroom and help restore order, but also care. Tonight, Representative Braybeck couldn't be here because she's out on her mental health listening tour with Rep. Stone. But she sent me with the words earlier, and she also sent me here today because of my very special relationship to Sheriff Clayton, whom I affectionately call Uncle Jerry. So let's welcome Sheriff Clayton.
Should always be nervous when an elected official reaches into their pocket, pulls out a bunch of paper. Thank you so very much. Thank you, Morgan. I appreciate it. I am really honored. Thank you for the warm introduction. Honored to share a few thoughts and experiences. Before I do that, I want to make sure that I recognize your honoring of Dr. Cheryl Kubiak. She's a rock star in the state. A lot of what we do is based on the work that she does. So she's done pioneering work, and we are better for what we do in Washtenaw County because of her work, so I want to recognize her at the end. So I only get in a little bit of trouble because I recognize Dr. Kubiak before I recognize my wife. My wife of over 30 years, Sybil Clayton, has, I do what I do and have been able to sustain what I sustain because of the support and leadership of my wife, so thank you very much. I'd also be remiss because I would not be here on time if it wasn't for Kathy White, my executive assistant who keeps me in line. So let me get started. I was told I had a few minutes and I want to take those, but I don't want to waste your time. It's been a great night. So thank you for honoring me tonight. However, the honor really goes to the Washtenaw County community. So it's a community of shared beliefs and values. And those values are that none of us should be restricted from experiencing the highest quality of life because of what we represent. That living with mental health disorders should not be criminalized, but should be supported so we can all be our best selves. And although we have a long way to go in realizing this vision, it is a vision that all of our partners and stakeholders share. It's a vision focused on inclusivity, and it's focused on proactive support for individuals living with a behavioral health disorder, as well as their families and friends who support them. So kick back, get a cup of coffee, and let me share a story with you. a story that profoundly changed my perspective of what we're supposed to do, not only from a sheriff's office perspective, but from a county's perspective. So as part of our quality control assurance process at the sheriff's office, as administrators and executives and command officers, occasionally we review reports, we look at video, just to see officer activity, right? What are they doing? How are they doing it? That's how you get better. So we'll look at body cam video, we look at in-car video, we look at jail camera information. So one evening I'm in my vehicle, and I got a radio in my vehicle, and I'm listening to the radio, and I caught the tail end of an incident that just piqued my interest. Something happened, I'm like, wow, I don't know where, or I heard where it was, but it was just really, really interesting, right at the end. So I asked one of my command staff, I said, look, send me that video so I can review it the next day. So I come in the office, there's a CD sitting on my desk. Those were the days we actually had a CD. Nowadays, I can get it all from the cloud, right? I can just boom, just pull it off. But that wasn't those times. So I also had a copy of the police report. So I knew that the deputies were responding to a call for service related to a possible domestic violence. The call came from a mother and a daughter who alleged that the son had physically attacked both of them, had assaulted both of them, was threatening them, and was threatening more violence. So from the address, I knew that it was in this residential neighborhood that was close to a busy street. You could walk a quarter of a mile, you get into a busy street and a commercial business district. So several deputies responded to the call. So as the video starts, the first image I see is an African-American male. It was dark, it was night. I see an African-American male who obviously was highly agitated. He was very agitated. So as I watched the video, which is, coming from what we call the contact deputy. So a number of deputies responded. We usually have what's called contact cover. It's a deputy that's doing the contact. So that way, you've probably seen those videos where everybody's yelling at the person, and you can't understand why the person's confused because everybody's yelling at them. So the way we do it, you got one contact, everybody else sort of steps back. So what I saw from the contact deputy's body cam video is the following. A subject who from now on I'll refer to as John is walking away from the deputies, and every 10 or so yards, he turns around facing the deputies, slowly walking back, right? So all the time, he's incoherently yelling obscenities in the direction of the deputies. And additionally, he begins to yell threats while he's holding a large knife. So imagine his residential neighborhood, he's in crisis, he's yelling, he's got a knife. So all of the deputies are maintaining a safe distance while the contact deputy is issuing verbal directions. Really an attempt to gain voluntary compliance, trying to talk to him, keeping distance, trying to de-escalate. So this continues for about 15 minutes as they slowly walk through this neighborhood. So as the situation evolves, I can see that the scenery now is changing from a residential setting to now the busy street, right? So we see that. And as I stated earlier, it's nighttime and it's dark, but it's not too late. It's not so late that you won't have a lot of traffic and the possibility of people actually milling about in the street going to the businesses. So John then moves to the middle of a 5-lane roadway. So 2 lanes go in one direction, 2 lanes go in another direction. You got your sit-on lane that oftentimes is used as a turning lane. So John's in that lane. Deputies are following, trying to talk to him. Got traffic going on both sides. This is a dangerous situation for everybody involved. The contact deputy continues to engage with no success, trying to talk John down. So after failing to get compliance using verbal direction from John, who's still holding the knife, the deputy warns John that I'm about to tase you, and he tases him the first time. So John's wearing a big, heavy, loose coat, doesn't take effect. So they continue this going back and forth. Deputy continues to talk to John, telling him that he's trying to help him, doesn't want him to get hurt, doesn't want him to get hit by a car. John is still hyped up, yelling back and forth, yelling obscenities, all sorts of things. There's a second taser deployment that's not effective. Now let's acknowledge that a taser deployment in the middle of the street with moving traffic has its own dangers, right? We recognize that. However, the deputies had limited options, especially as their concerns increased because John now is moving like he's going to cross off into traffic, and now they can see in the businesses, now people are outside the businesses. So now things are starting to increase. John then takes off running, and as traffic dodges him, remember what I said, he didn't dodge traffic. Traffic is dodging him. Horns are blaring because people are blowing their horns. The lights from the commercial businesses are flashing. Like, you can see all this in the body cam, and as the deputies chasing them, body cams jumping. So it's a chaotic situation. John seems to be at the height of his crisis at this point. So finally, another sheriff's office vehicle coming in another direction sort of cuts John off. So John's running away from the deputies, and what you see in the body cam is as the vehicle cuts John off, John turns around facing the deputies with the knife in his hand. And at that same time, a deputy tases him just enough to distract John so the deputies can engage, take him down, take the gun, get him in handcuffs, and they secure John without John being hurt. Now, I think we've all seen similar images captured by body cam video, by cell phone videos, people in the public, right? And oftentimes those images are depicting the death of that person that's in crisis as a result of a police intervention. We've all seen those unfortunate circumstances. So after I watched that video, I quietly prayed for John and my staff, because I knew we had avoided another situation. This was not John's first contact with the system. And after viewing the video, I asked my staff, I said, do some research. I want to know what John's history is. And I also want you to find out if he has any kind of relationship with a mental health provider, service provider. So here's what we found out about John. John had 46 previous contacts with the local police, 10 of them resulting in arrest. We also found out that John was also a victim 2 other times of assault, or himself was a victim of assault. We found out that John had 6 prior misdemeanor and felony convictions. And on 2 separate occasions, this was not the first time John had been in a situation threatening deputies with a weapon. There had been another time. It had been in a house, and I think it had been with a bat. So while I was relieved that John was unharmed during the incident, and very proud of the fact that despite the fact that they were repeatedly threatened with a person with a dangerous weapon, someone who was accused of physically assaulting others, our staff stayed true to our value. Our values of recognizing and honoring the sanctity of all human life. So when we talk about, it's not just our deputies go home at night, everybody should go home at night, right? Sound, physically, emotionally, psychologically. And our belief that no one in crisis should die as a result of a police intervention. I also knew that we'd been fortunate, some would say lucky, that we must do better, that we can do better. And so to be better, my thought at the time was we need to have be thoughtful and deliberate while developing a long-term, sustainable, community-based strategy. That includes a number of things: investment in proactive upstream support and services, development of local facilities where we can do an assessment, treatment, and stabilization, so the only options a deputy sheriff has or a police officer has is jail or maybe trying to get somebody in PES. And we know what's going to happen there, right? They're going to end up in jail. Training designed to prepare first responders, not just police, but all first responders, in how do you manage a mental health crisis in the moment, de-escalating, with a value and an outcome that everybody goes away safe and sound, right? And also community education. How do we educate the community and align their expectations with what is possible? And also get the community to support public officials to get them to invest structural dollars to make the kind of sustainable change we need. Not one time, not just to make everybody happy, not so they can do it in their next political election. Structural investment that changes lives. So, pivot. I got a few minutes. Here's what came from that. So that was changing. So I already knew all this stuff, but I was like, man, just watching it. And I was like, well, we're failing our staff because we're not training them. Our staff did that because of values, not because of training. Now, culture is important, right? Because I can write policy, but if culture is messed up, they're not going to follow the policy. But we had to catch up to the culture in our organization. So Washtenaw County Community Mental Health has always been a good partner. They were and still are a contracted service provider for our incarcerated population. But in early 2016, which is when I looked at this video, and deciding we can and must do better, I reached out to my good friend and partner, the executive director of Washtenaw Community Mental Health, Trish Cortez, who's also a rock star, her and her team. And Trish and I sat down and we started to strategize about not only how we can enhance our partnership, but more importantly, how can we create a community-based movement to make things better in Washtenaw County. Now, Washtenaw County prides itself on caring for people and wraparound services. But let's be honest, we're not nearly as good as we think we are or nearly as good as we can be. And once you acknowledge that, then you can roll up your sleeves and do the work to be as good as you want to be and as good as you can be. So we started the process by first convening a meeting of critical stakeholders, including our 2 hospital systems, our local behavioral health service providers, and our local advocacy groups. Just talking it through, just trying to get an idea of the landscape. We followed what I believe is an important thing of what we call making a case for change approach, which has 4 steps. You examine your current state, you identify the consequences of maintaining the status quo, you propose new strategies, and then you explain the benefits of successful planning, implementation, and sustainability. So we started that process. We assessed the current state. As Dr. Kubiak talked about, we did the sequential intercept. Right? We did that, had all the stakeholders in the room. And guess what, folks, we identified? We didn't have nearly the amount and the kind and the right kind of local service providers to meet the needs of the people in our community. We wouldn't have known that if we hadn't honestly sat down and started that process. We saw gaps, we saw overlaps. We stood up a mental health diversion council of many stakeholders in the community. 3 primary subcommittees: data, policy, training. I'll just speak really, really quickly to the data piece. Here's what we found out with data. So we, with the help of and guidance of Dr. Kubiak's team, were able to merge jail data and mental health data. Guess what? It paints the picture for you. Just as Dr. Kubiak talked about, we had spent too much time operating in silos. Let's bring those data sets together and really get the picture and the profile of who we're dealing with so we can put the right strategies in place. We found out, it just confirmed what we thought. A large percentage of the population struggling with substance use disorder. 80% of the incarcerated population with a mental health diagnosis also had a substance use disorder, right? Co-occurring. Again, we knew it, but it just confirmed it for us. Over 50% of the population on some kind of psychotropic medication. 40% of the population struggling with opioid use disorder. And over 60% of the population between the ages of 17 and 30. So we started to see a picture. So if we're going to develop a strategy, you want to know where you're starting from, who your target population. I'm almost done. And then we looked at plans for the future focus, right? So there were a number of community-based strategies and initiatives. I'm just going to focus on jail diversion for now. So we do this thing called ultimate outcomes. And ultimate outcomes is simply this. Some people call them goals. But think about, here's how you do the work. So in the public sector, you all know this. In the public sector, we screw stuff up because we start with the money first. We look at our budget and we say, well, we can't do this, we can't do that because we don't have enough money. What if we actually started with the outcomes we want to achieve first? And then talked about the strategies to put in place to achieve it. And then talked about the structure required to execute those strategies. And then you talked about what it would cost to put those structure in place. Guess what? If you get the community on board with the outcomes and the strategies and the structure, then they will support it from a financial standpoint. And I'm going to talk about that last piece in a second. Here are ultimate outcomes. So the first thing we want to do is impact the prevalence of people with behavioral health disorder in our jail. So we want to reduce the number of people with mental health and substance use disorder in our jail. We had seen it increase from 15 to 17 to 5%. So we looked at that. Recidivism, just as Dr. Kubiak had talked about. We wanted to reduce the rate of people coming back into jail that had a behavioral health disorder. In 2017, the recidivism rate for people with a mental health and substance use disorder in Washtenaw County was 58%, compared to 29% for the general population. What's that tell you? Right? So we started to look at that. And we also wanted to reduce the length of stay. So the length of stay we looked at is that the rate of the length of stay, the average length of stay for someone with a behavioral health disorder was 27 days. And it was 11 days for general population. So we started to look at what our goals are, and the last one we looked at is we want to have an additional focus on reducing the racial and economic disparities, the impact of the criminal legal apparatus on people with behavioral health disorders. Strategic initiatives, I'll just talk about two. The first one was Stepping Up. Stepping Up was important because it became a county initiative. The board got behind it, we passed a resolution, and guess what? Then it starts to compel stakeholders who would not normally come to the table to come to the table. And the last one, the one I'm really proud of, the one we've been working on, that I've been conceptualizing to since 2014, really first as a public safety millage, but when we were facing the mental health, was our public safety mental health millage. Passed in 2018, 8-year millage generating about $16 million. That was the key. And the reason why it was able to be done, because we articulated outcomes, strategies, structure, and do you agree with this, folks? They're like, yeah, so here's what we need you to invest. So I think it was like 64% approval. So here are specific outcomes as I wrap this up. So here are the things that we've done. I'll just hit a couple highlights. So we development of managing mental health crisis training. So it started off as a sheriff's office training and evolved with, how many of you know Dr. Deborah Pines, who is another rock star? Judge Mack knows, right? All over the country, all over. She's a gem that has landed in Michigan from Massachusetts. So when we were developing our training, we were like, Dr. Pines, help us. Teach us what you did in Massachusetts. So we started in the sheriff's office where it got adopted by the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, became a statewide initiative. It's evolving again. So now there's a training that's coming down the pipe. That's a 20-hour training, 4 hours self-paced, 8 hours cognitive in the classroom, 8 hours intensive scenario that is being backed and supported by the governor and by the state. So police agencies at some point will get reimbursed by sending their staff to that training. So there's no excuse. And here's the other thing. It's based on this idea of alternative responders and co-responders, so it's not just police training. It's for EMTs, for firefighters, for clinicians to teach us how to have that coordinated or co-response, which is we know is always needed. We're in the planning stages of doing a similar training in corrections, although I must say, put the pressure on my fellow sheriffs because they don't want to roll with this one. But we need it, right? Despite our efforts, we know people are going to end up in our jails. And if they end up in our jails, they have to be treated in the right way so they return back in the community in a better position to live their best lives. We are piloting our law enforcement assisted diversion deflection lead that is rolled out this month with a main focus on interception 0 and 1 for deflection, 2 and 3 for diversion from the criminal legal apparatus. See, I don't call it a system because all of those know there is no criminal justice system. It's not designed to be a system. It's designed to be these separate components that are adversarial. So we got to recognize what we're dealing with to have the right kind of strategy in place. And I'll end with this. So we're also creating a framework for what we call our continuum of community responders, which is based on this concept of the right people in the right place, in the right time, with the right resources, doing the right thing. That's a whole lot of rights to do something wrong, right? So we're trying to get that in place. So the continuum is pretty simple. I think we have 3 of them. You already have your police response, and our data confirms that our deputy sheriffs interact with someone in crisis at least twice in a 24-hour period, right? We already have a clinician-only response team. So Washington County has a 24-hour crisis team that responds. We have a coordinated response, which is front-end planning, where clinicians and police officers talk about how they're going to interact with someone before they do. And now we're working on the concept of co-response. I want to put a clinician and a deputy in the car together, working together. And the last thing is we got to think about how do we leverage technology. So we now have body cams that can live stream what's going on. Imagine if we live stream what the deputy sees to a clinician somewhere else, who can provide them guidance and feedback while they're rolling to that scene. How quickly how many of these situations that go wrong can we mitigate? And the last one is, some places have clinicians in dispatch centers. And that might be possible. But what if we had, I call this 3-way call for service crisis management. Where you almost had an iPad or you FaceTime the clinician with the dispatcher, or you 3-way call them and they're on the call. The clinician's not managing the call, but they might be able to do an assessment to help the dispatcher send the right resource. So all of that, folks, we're not done. I am so honored and privileged to be here tonight to share a few thoughts and a few words with you. Thank you so very much. We will continue to do what we do because of people like Dr. Kubiak and Judge Mack and other folks doing what they do. Collectively, we can make a change and a difference. Thank you so very much.